How you doing, everybody? It's Wardy here, and we're back at it with our latest Big Mets Update segment, March 4th, 2025, as we have a plethora of topics to get into, headlined by the following. Recapping today's spring loss against the St. Louis Cardinals, in which it was another offensive snooze fest for the Mets, but we'll get into key takeaways like Tyler Megill and Ryan Stanek making their spring debuts. From there, we will get into guys like Starling Marte, as he's not only still available via trade, but the Kansas City Royals still want him and his services. We'll get into where exactly that reporting stems from, the likelihood, unlikelihood of a guy like Starling Marte being traded. Jesse Winker, what a red-hot start spring training he has had thus far. We'll get into the numbers with Jesse and ultimately what has led him to having such a hot start this spring here in a New York Metropolitan uniform, and other key takeaways on the pitching front from today and yesterday, including guys like Garrett as well. A little bit more on Tyler Zuber, as we touched on from yesterday's coverage, along with Jose Quintana. Now that we found out how much money he landed on with the Brewers, was that the right or wrong move by the Mets to not bring Jose Quintana back to Queens for 2025? That, along with the Mets' first round of roster cuts to spring training that we're going to deep dive in a second beside me, is all that we're going to highlight. So smash that like and subscribe on as your first chime in. Let me know your initial reactions in the comments down below. And thank you guys again for 32,000 subscribers. And as a further thank you, I'm going to be giving away a Mets jersey to one lucky subscriber here at a live show later on this week, either as early as tomorrow or probably at latest Thursday or Friday. One of those days we'll be doing a live show with a jersey giveaway involved, and all you guys got to do to enter is to make sure A, you're subscribed, and B, that you're a part of the live show when it happens. And I'll do my best to give you guys notice at least the day of there on the community tab on the YouTube channel. And speaking of YouTube, to all my amazing members here on the platform, we have new membership emojis, updated emojis of guys like Juan Soto, Francisco Alvarez, Mark Vientos, Kodai Senga, Francisco Lindor, Pete Alonso, and others. And all you guys got to do to enter for your memberships today is by simply clicking on that membership button here on the YouTube channel. Thank you so much in advance for that, folks. But let's get into the breakdown beside me that you see here first and foremost, which has to do with the Mets roster cuts. As we know, per Anthony DeComo there, that we saw covering the Mets through MLB.com, broke down the first round of cuts for the Mets. It is as follows. We have Brandon Sproat, Blade Tidwell, we got Ty Adcock, we have Alze, we have Dominic Hamill, Rafael Ortega, we have Ryan Clifford, Drew Gilbert, and going down the list just a little bit more to make sure I don't miss anyone here. Jet Williams, Luke Ritter, Alexander Ramirez, Kevin Parada, and that's going to round them out. And Rafael Ortega, if I didn't say that already. The good news for you guys, especially in the case of Brandon Sproat, our top pitching prospect, you'll still be able to see him this spring training. The only thing that changes now is that they're no longer working with the major league club. They're going to be working solely in minor league camp there still in Port St. Lucie. So in the case of Sproat, he's still going to be getting in-game action that we're going to see highlights of in a breakdown. But this just reaffirms that, yes, Brandon Sproat will be beginning the season in AAA Syracuse. Hopefully it will not be long before he gets the inevitable call with the Mets, as he certainly has ace caliber potential. One looking at the upside for the flamethrowing right-hander for the Mets, who just came in and MLB Pipeline's top 30 prospect rankings that we broke down in a video yesterday. Check it out in case you guys haven't, as Brandon Sproat, is a surprise absolutely nobody, is their number one on the Mets leaderboard. But in case of guys like Jet Williams, who looked very good in all of his sample sizes so far this spring, Ryan Clifford had a big home run the other day that we saw. Drew Gilbert, as we know that we talked about in yesterday's content, won't probably be getting into any Grapefruit League games, unfortunately, as they're taking it slow with him coming back from the hamstring injury that sidelined him the majority of the 2024 minor league season for Drew. But no less, looking forward to seeing more of these guys on the backfields for the Mets, as I'll be in attendance of Port St. Lucie games there starting this Saturday, March 8th. So I hope to see many of you amazing Mets fans at spring training. I'll be there either March 8th to the 11th or at absolute latest the 13th. I'll be hitting games in not just Port St. Lucie, Jupiter, potentially West Palm area as well over those next couple days. And we will be doing a live event probably Sunday evening there. I'm still trying to hash out the details, so once I have them for you as to where it'll be, I'll let all you guys know. Maybe we'll have some special guests as well in the Mets community. But I want to know your initial reactions to the first round of roster cuts in the comments down below. I know this could naturally bum some fans out that want to see more of these key prospects. Like I said, some of them will still be getting in-game action for you guys to watch, either televised or at least minimum clipped in highlight form from SNY, or that you guys will see chopped up here on the platform. But I know Brandon Sproat, among others, we would love to see more of them. We will to a degree, but there will be some prospects that you're not going to see as much of for the remainder now of spring training. But folks, now let's get into our first main topic outside of the roster cuts, and that has to briefly do with Jose Quintana. As we know, Jose Quintana officially signed yesterday with the Milwaukee Brewers on a one-year deal. Since then, we found out that it was right around $4.25 million, which, including a 110% tax, is just under $9 million, is what it would have costed the Mets should that have happened. Now, if I'm David Stearns, and if I'm Steve Cohen, and I look at both Frankie Montas and Sean Manaea going down with injury, especially Montas, who will not return until early June more than likely, it's hard to stomach the idea of not getting a guy in Jose Quintana to return, especially under $10 million when looking at the tax involved. For context, everybody, the Mets spent right around $250K more on Griffin Canning this offseason, who led all eligible starters in the American League last year in home runs given up over Jose Quintana, who gave the Mets a 3.75 ERA across 170 innings last season. Yes, I understand that this means a couple things. It means, one, the Mets never wanted to bring Jose Quintana back, even with all the great strides they had for the Mets and what was an up and down year in 2024. They believe that he is not reliable nearly enough for them, and they love the idea of Griffin Canning, who does have good off-speed and breaking pitches, to deviate more from his fastball, utilize that sinker more, and have more success in doing so. Very much so what the Mets did with a guy like Luis Severino last year, so I can understand the level of confidence in the lab, while also understanding the Mets are one more injury away from Clay Holmes being their number 2 starter potentially. We don't want that to happen, right? And that's not a slight on Clay, as it's a reality of how much the depth has quickly dwindled from having quality arms there that can eat innings, and Manaea and Montas, to now having anything but a certainty when looking at your rotation configuration. Right now, your 4, 5, and 6 are in no particular order of Griffin Canning, Tyler Megill, and Paul Blackburn. Whether that's the same order, whether that's different, that is yet to be seen. But the point is I think there's still a fair argument as to being in favor of a Jose Quintana reunion, especially at that price point. Mets fans, do you think that David Stearns and Steve Cohen made the right choice and you trust the lab, or are you going to see it to believe it? And I gotta say, as many of you guys know, I love David Stearns and I firmly have faith in him and his decisions, but he's going to need to prove me wrong with this one, because this feels eerily similar to me to a degree of the Mets kind of giving a longer leash than they need to guys like Adrian Hauser last year, right? Maybe giving a little bit too long of a leash to a guy in Jake Diekman because we had the commitment and you had such little lefty options in the pen. I understand that, while also understanding that, you know, how many times do we need to watch the same crap to realize what we're getting here in the case of those guys? And let's see how much the Mets pitching lab really blossoms in the likes of Griffin Canning, Paul Blackburn, Tyler Megill, most recently signed in Jose Urena, who will be a swingman option for the Mets, so getting starting options as well as relief options. And was a stud as a reliever last year, posting a sub-3 ERA in 64 2/3 innings for the Texas Rangers. Urena has a lot of light movement, and we saw that during his time in Miami to kickstart his career, so we'll circle back on the rotation front, especially given what happens or lack thereof throughout the remainder of spring training, everybody. But now let's get into breaking down here our key takeaways from today's spring training outing, because we do know that the Mets did falter today. What was it, 6-1 or so, or 5-1 against the St. Louis Cardinals. The Mets had no offense, zip and nada, the entire one in this one. Tyler Megill was solid, that we will get into shortly, but there's one man that has stepped up on the offensive front more often than not, and that continues to be our guy in Jesse Winker. As many of you guys know, Jesse Winker is one of my favorite players on the Mets, going back to when the Mets first landed him last year. I've been a heavy favorite of his, really going back to 2019 Jesse Winker, the villain that he was against the Mets, along with Jose Iglesias during their time with the Cincinnati Reds and blowing Edwin Diaz saves, because of course Edwin was blowing them in 2019. His first year here feels like yesterday. Fast forward to present day, after Jesse had a lot of fun with the Reds, the Mariners as well, didn't have fun with the Brewers, but then of course hit a tank against Adrian Hauser and the Mets on the 4th of July game, 11 o'clock game to win it against the Mets last year, gets acquired by them at the trade deadline and never looks back. Now, an awesome story that I'm so excited to share with each and every one of you on the topic of Jesse Winker that was on today's broadcast per ESPN was as follows, and I quote, "Jesse Winker was a free agent and he kept telling his agent, 'I don't want to go anywhere but the Mets.' Why would you want to play anywhere else after what happened in New York last year?" And mind you, he said that before landing Juan Soto, the Mets landing Juan Soto. And that was Tim Kirkian from that we saw from ESPN. I know I butchered his last name and I apologize. I know exactly who Tim is though, but his last name always throws me off, so I apologize for that. No less, everybody, Jesse Winker, who obviously wanted to be here, who thrived in being a guy that you love to hate to root against and to love to have on your team. That's the case of Mets fans now, and Jesse Winker, villain turned foe. Jesse now happy to be in Queens in this DH platoon situation, and every single game that he's been out there, it feels like he's got at least one hit and one solid opposite field double or so. Jesse Winker's batting a cool 417 with over 1,000 OPS. It's very small sample size so far this spring, including a pair of RBIs and at least a pair of doubles. He has 2 or 3 doubles at minimum, but Jesse's looked really quality with his at-bats so far this spring training. And it's great to see how locked in early Winker is, because he's going to play a pivotal role for this Mets DH that I really don't think that we should understate whatsoever. I mean, yes, you might not have the endless power production that maybe you'll get with Marcell Ozuna from the Atlanta Braves, but even in a platoon role for Jesse Winker and the Mets in this DH spot, there's a lot of potential for them to get a good amount of power from Jesse in this limited role, as well as a guy, whether that's Starling Marte or someone else, should the Mets part ways with Starling Marte, that we will transition into in just a little bit here in the show, folks. A lot of discussion on the Marte front, obviously, with what is happening with him. Is he going to be traded or not? That's a great question right now. And the big thing with Jesse Winker has been, you're locked in early. That's awesome to see. Now, how's he going to really be in a 162 in this Mets uniform? I think it's going to be nothing short of great things. He's going to continue to be a fan favorite, a guy that's going to clutch up and choke up on the bat in clutch situations when he needed to, where he thrived big time last year. Jesse Winker continued to fall on everybody. He might not be the sexiest name when looking at a lineup filled with Juan Soto, Francisco Lindor, Pete Alonso, Mark Vientos, but he is absolutely a guy that's going to get down and dirty and clutch up when the Mets need him most throughout the course of the 162. Mets fans, continue to let me know your thoughts on Jesse Winker in the comments down below, because I got one more thing that I definitely want to show you guys on the Jesse front, and that is as follows. And I'm actually was initially gonna play the clip. Yeah, let's go ahead and let's play this clip quick, but I'm gonna make sure that I don't play the entire audio, or else then they're not gonna be happy about it. And where is this audio clip? Let's go ahead and find this real quick, as I got this all set up nice for you guys. Okay, folks, so I'm not gonna play it right away. I'm gonna wait till we get a couple seconds in here. Just because I don't want to get flagged or anything, because this is from ESPN specifically. But all right, guys, so Jesse Winker, who got a chance to speak with ESPN today there in their broadcast, because ESPN is famous for having other players do the talking instead of themselves when it comes to actual doing proper play-by-play. But Jesse, who I'm very happy to see interviewed here, went to break down that, who is challenging the call of the plate? Mind you, Ryan Stanek is on the bump that we saw there. Francisco Alvarez is challenging the call that it was an actual strike and not a ball. And as soon as Jesse Winker noticed that was Alvarez, he said, it's 100% going to be a strike. And here's why.
For sure.
Let's see.
I'll bet anything this is.
It is. Why were you so confident?
Because, man, Alvy knows, man. Alvy knows.
See, that's our catcher. I love that. So Jesse is being a team player as always. And yes, that was a dotted bottom left corner by Ryan Stanek that we're going to talk about just in a second, everybody. But Jesse Winker, always a great interview. Looks so clean with the new spring hats as well. You got to love ourselves some Jesse, am I right? But guys, now let's transition just for a couple seconds into talking about more on these takeaways, because we want to highlight guys like Tyler Megill and Ryan Stanek and their performances today. So let's do exactly that. Tyler Megill gave the Mets a solid 2.2 innings of work in his debut today. And the first, he gave up a 2-out walk that we saw to Wilson Contreras, who's now the first base option for the St. Louis Cardinals. No longer their catching option, because their top prospect there that'll be in that position this year. We saw him have a little control in that first inning, especially on pitches on glove side. But as the game went on and as he got into the second inning, he did find himself in more of a groove. He did give up a pop out to Arenado, but when I say give up, I mean that in a great way, because nothing transpired there in the inning after the 2-out walk. That is the only true thing he gave up. So Tyler Megill, who did throw north of 30 pitches in the first inning, nothing was truly easy of a 1-2-3 type thing for him that we saw in the first inning. Had to deal with grinding it out right away against those Cardinals batters, who, mind you, did have a good amount of starters in their lab today, but still doesn't change the fact that Tyler Megill, you could tell, was a little rusty in the early goings. But the most notable thing on Tyler Megill was the velocity, because not only in the first, but as we got into the second, he touched on 98 on the gun when looking at the heater. And that's notable for Megill, as we've seen in recent years. When he's had the velocity sitting a certain way, he's had success. When the velocity is dipped below a certain amount, that's where he's been throwing meatballs and causing a great issue. And the second inning, we saw unfortunately, we saw Donovan for the Cardinals get a leadoff triple. That was because Jose Siri tried to make a play there in center. It wasn't for lack of effort. He was hustling hard, but it just got past him, and then a ricochet, of course, the opposite direction off the wall, so he had to do a complete pivot, step, turn, and that's exactly why Donovan got all the way to third. Then he ultimately scored on a single there by I believe Fernan right after or so by the Cardinals. That would be the only run that they would score against Tyler Megill in this matchup, and then he would escape the jam from there, and then Megill would record a couple outs there in the third inning before they passed the ball to Overton, who gave the Mets just that 0.1 inning, so that final out there of the third to close it out. But Tyler Megill, that we saw 2.2 innings of work today, including 1 earned run allowed, 1 walk, 2 strikeouts that we saw from Megill. And I think something that is fairly notable when we get on the topic of Tyler is breaking down a bit on his arsenal here, because shout out to my guys at Pitch Profiler as well as TJ Stats, who give you a lot of great advanced info here on X, how they're looking especially above league average. And you guys can take these with a grain of salt in spring training, however which way you do. But when looking at Pitch Profiler, we had the four-seam fastball was roughly 50% above league average today. The sinker, the curveball, the cutter, all above league average, and the slider was right around 30% above league average. But that is from Pitch Profiler's point of view, whereas if you go to TJ Stats, again, two different people that use their own metrics to break down basically, how good is a pitcher's pitch, league average out of 100. Then you see TJ Stats, who still had Megill above league average in every pitch today, not named the curveball as that was just under league average, but nothing as significant as Pitch Profiler. So again, take it with a grain of salt, but the most notable thing here is that out of the 5-6 pitch mix that Tyler Megill was throwing today, it was looking solid once he started to have control and command on his side, and that velocity certainly was benefiting him as well. I really did like to see there having the cutter a part of the arsenal there too, utilizing more of that sinker, and hopefully not hating that sweeper going forward, as that could be a huge, hopefully at times a punchy pitch for him if he can really get some bite. No less, want to know your guys' thoughts on Tyler Megill, everybody, because then as we get into Ryan Stanek, he came in without a problem. 3 up, 3 down, and Ryan Stanek's spring debut today, and as you could expect, he of course was looking good on the velocity. Mr. Stanek, the man who absolutely has the luscious blonde locks going, had the four-seam fastball today that was above league average, the splitter that was looking good, almost 30% above league average per Pitch Profiler, as well as the sinker today. The velo looked really, really strong there, put up a 40% whiff rate today, which we're not going to complain about at all. And it looks like he did add, in fact, a baby sweeper in the arsenal. So shout out to Ryan Stanek, and shout out to his wife, who I know has been making fresh bread loaves for players in the clubhouse, as that's been a story going on. And our friend here on the platform at Athlete Logos made a cool shirt for some players in the clubhouse, including Stanek and his wife. On Stanek, his wife making their own homemade bread and passing it around. I thought that was a really cool little story this spring training. But Ryan Stanek looked very sharp, as was the case as well with Reed Garrett, who continues to look solid this spring training. Reed had a pair of strikeouts and what was a 1-2-3 shutdown inning for him. For Reed, above league average on all of his pitches today, not named the sweeper, but the sweeper was still around league average. The splitter, the cutter, the sinker, all look strong. When you look at the velo as well, he was topping out today on the sinker right around 96 to 97 miles per hour. So a lot more encouragement for Reed Garrett, who's trying to prove that 2024 was not a fluke year. That's the start of something special for him as a reliever that the Mets can care about for more than just a year on end. And I firmly believe that to be the case. While I do think that one of the following guys in the Budos, the Nunez, the Garretts may not have as much success this year, I'm not going to put that all on Reed, as I think is just naturally going to happen with some guys that blossom out of nowhere this past year. And now we have new guys in the lab, new guys in the mix to see what they're capable of. But Mets fans, definitely let me know all your thoughts on the key takeaways, of course, that we saw over the past day or so in spring trading. And the final pitcher that I did want to touch on, and then we are going to get into the big discussion here on star-studded Starling Marte, is our guy on Tyler Zuber. I know we talked about it yesterday, but Tyler Zuber's stuff looked so good yesterday per Pitch Profiler that his sweeper was 80% above league average, and the pro stuff plus, it was ridiculous. The four-seam, the cutter, and the changeup all look superior as well, especially the four-seam there. And mind you, he had nearly 2 feet of sweep and 7.2 inches of lift, reminiscent of his indoor shape this winter that we saw when looking at that sweeper. It was nasty. Really, really nasty. Now, four-seam, too, looked incredibly flat with the VAA, so a lot of these be encouraged by with Tyler Zuber, who the Mets acquired at the trade deadline last year. Originally was a Long Island Duck in the early goings of last season, then was signed by the Rays, and then picked up via trade by David Stearns and the Mets. Let me know all your thoughts on the pitching front, folks. Thank you so much for exactly that. And no, we're not getting into any offensive takeaways, because outside of Alex Ramirez bringing in a run or so today, that was about that. No one hit a lick outside of guys like Jesse Winker that had a hit today offensively that we saw, and a couple guys getting a walk. Alexander Canario, who I was hoping to see get a big hit, we didn't really see much of that going either. So hopefully we see more hits and more offense with the Mets in the coming days this spring training. But folks, let's get into what's happening with Starling Marte. I know you guys are awfully curious as to what's happening there, as has been the case with myself too. And Joel Sherman broke an article yesterday stating the following: the Royals haven't completely taken their eye off Starling Marte. The Rangers not seeking a reunion with David Robertson, which I think is silly. I would want D-Rob back. I don't know about you guys. Oh, wow, guys, breaking news as we say this, so I'm glad we have it in the recording. That is very notable, everybody. The Mets just placed Sean Reed-Foley on waivers, so we are going to get into that in just a second as to what that means for the club, too. I'm really happy that I had that part of the video, but now that the Mets have placed a Sean Reed-Foley on waivers, that means that has opened up a roster spot. You know, it's definitely a spot for them that they can then utilize for someone else in the bullpen, and I have a feeling, especially knowing that SRF is not in the same position this spring that guys like Max Kranick, among others, are, that this is what's going to open the door for a Max Kranick type to begin the year in this Mets bullpen. I'm telling you guys, it's going to happen. Sean Reed-Foley obviously missed a good chunk last year with injury. He was solid when he was out there, but it's all about being healthy. But now getting back to Starling Marte for a second, be here, and that was really cool. We don't get breaking news too often while we're doing our recordings, but Starling Marte, he is still a trade option. So much so that in separate reporting later on by the New York Post yesterday, they did make note that the Kansas City Royals are even trying to land Adam Duvall because they want to land a bat that has some bop that can be in the middle of their lineup, but Duvall said no. He's going to retire if he doesn't get a guaranteed major league contract, and no team is presenting that to the injury-riddled Adam Duvall. Color me shocked. In the case of Starling Marte, let's take it a step back for a second, folks, because we reported, per Pat Ragazzo, a month and a half ago at least, when it first came out, that the Mets were not only trying to trade Marte all offseason long, or still are, but the Kansas City Royals and the Mets were in active negotiation during the winter meetings. And the trade fell through as the Mets were trying to land Hunter Harvey. That information just became noted by Joel Sherman because he's breaking it like this is new news when it's not. But what is new news is the fact that even after that trade has fell through, fast forward a couple months later, the Royals are still in the Starling Marte market per Joel Sherman in this article. You guys can check it out. They haven't ruled him out just yet. They still like the idea of bringing Marte in, with the Mets eating obviously a good chunk of his contract. For the Mets, obviously, I think it makes a lot of sense to part ways with Marte, knowing how limited his defensive ability is right now. And that defensive ability, I think, bothers the Mets more than anything else. If Marte could handle any outfield position, when asked, I think they would be fine. But knowing that Marte is truly a standalone platoon DH option for them right now, with Jesse Winker, with his knee soreness still, knowing he's past his mid-30s at this point, knowing that this is a player that is not going to give you much reps in the corner outfield, and if he does, it's not going to be good right now. He's such a show of what he used to be because of, unfortunately, how much his body's been breaking down. I was a massive Starling Marte fan throughout his entire career at his first year in Queens, but sadly, as much as he's been that contact king, the Mets need a little bit more there. I think they can benefit from versatility in that role. They can benefit from maybe having that roster spot have a guy that either has minor league options, like the guys in the Brett Batys, the Acuñas that we're going to get to before wrapping up the show, among others. I just think that for the Mets, it's been a broken record as to why they've been trying to trade Starling Marte. So don't be shocked if and when it happens, because everything is appearing to lead in the direction that as soon as the Mets get a suitor for Marte, where they at least get something of substance in return, especially maybe on the reliever front that has options that's of interest to them, maybe separate from the guy that they initially seeked on Hunter Harvey, then we could get somewhere. Because the reason why the trade fell through is the Royals didn't want to give up didn't want to even give up a Hunter Harvey type that they acquired from the Nationals at the trade deadline last year. For those that don't know, Hunter Harvey is like a higher upside and a little bit younger Ryan Stanek and profile look, and also what you're getting, a lot of similarity there. But Harvey was on the Mets board of a guy that they liked a lot with his options as well. Knowing that the Royals were settling for lesser relief options is why that fell through, apparently, per Joel Sherman. Let's see if not only these talks have started to pick up again, but if they will reach now a new settlement, knowing that maybe the Mets' priorities of what they want in the bullpen isn't exactly the same as it was when they were in initial trade negotiations back around the winter meetings when the Mets signed Juan Soto in the first 2 weeks of December or so. So, Mets fans, let me know how you feel about the latest on the Starling Marte front. But yes, the trade market is still open for him. Yes, the Royals still have of interest. And yes, it will not be shocking if Marte is traded before opening day. That's March 27th. So we're just a couple weeks away now. Marte is also expected to be back in game action, whether it's spring training games or minor league games in the backfields and the coming days that we broke down initially yesterday per Carlos Mendoza. But now, guys, to get a little bit more in here just for a second on the report regarding Sean Reed-Foley, I'm just going to double check to make sure that I didn't miss anything here, but it is pretty telling that the Mets are doing this because they're clearing up a roster spot. I can't imagine that they would be clearing up a roster spot to land someone externally, but at the same time, they very well could be cooking up something that we just don't know about at this very moment. So we'll find out what happens more on the Sean Reed-Foley front and that impact. I think it's more so to pave a way for someone that currently is not in the Mets bullpen configuration to crack in the bullpen configuration, but I'm all for speculation. Let's go out and sign David Robertson. Who says no? I mean, the Mets have said no, apparently, as much as D-Rob would be amazing for this Mets bullpen. I cannot believe he still hasn't signed somewhere yet. So going with the assumption that they will stay conservative with the 110% tax, I'm expecting to be one of those in-house options that are performing well in spring training to crack that spot and be part of the bullpen versus someone else right now. And I know that Stanek is a part of the team, so I'm saying it more so in the sense of I just see the pathway to Stanek being a part of the bullpen greater versus it being just about the 40-man itself. This is going to be fascinating. I don't exactly know what they're going to be doing here. We'll find out over the next day or so. For Sean Reed-Foley, obviously, I hope he stays in the organization. He's not a guy that I just want to see be part of with, but they're putting him on outright waivers for a reason, so that is something to bear in mind, everybody. But Mets fans, let me know your thoughts on Sean Reed-Foley as well as every other topic that we broke down today. It really does mean a lot. Let me make sure that I did not miss anything, and I don't believe I did. The final topics I have for you are as follows. We saw both Brett Baty and Luisangel Acuña get reps today in the infield. Baty got the start today at second base, while Acuña got the start at third. Acuña made a nice behind-the-back catch there, kind of effortless, a little pop-up that was saved there for Megill, as well as Baty looking sharp and as seamless as ever there at second base. So let's hear how both Acuña and Baty felt in those respective positions as they're both competing for that utility role.
Poniéndome ahí todos los días practicando, aprendiendo algo nuevo.
Yeah, I feel good. Working there every single day. Every day learning something new.
What did you learn today?
¿Qué tú aprendiste hoy?
Estaba en tercera base como diferencial, no tengo que el pre-pitch, no tengo como que irme para adelante, sino quedarme estático.
Yeah, so third base is different from shortstop, so I don't have to go forward on my pre-pitch. I just have to I have to get prepared on my pre-pitch, but I don't have to go forward. I just have to kind of stay even.
For just a guy who can play all over the infield. I mean, just generally, you think you could be that guy?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm the utility man, then that'd be awesome. Just any spot on this team to help the team win, I'm for. So.
And as we broke down in content over the past couple of days, and an awesome one-on-one breakdown that Tim Healy came out with through Newsday, implore you guys to check it out if you haven't already, on Brett Baty looking like the increased candidate to crack that Mets utility role. Baty said how, the motto has been just like last year, where I was putting my head down and competing hard to crack that roster spot and to ultimately win that job at third base. Now I'm out there competing every day to win this utility role, and that's what I'm destined and hoping to make happen. So Brett, wishing you the absolute best. Acuña is going to continue to hustle hard. Donovan Walton, the veteran option, as well as looks solid this spring, but falls in the same category as the Joey Wendells, the Zach Shorts, etc. I just can't see a world right now where he makes sense, where there's any upside outside of really just taking over a roster spot to be a late game replacement and a lefty bat off the bench that'll be more of a noodle. I could be wrong, obviously, but the numbers are what they are, and Baty's offensive output in his limited MLB sample size is far greater than I think what you're ever going to get with someone like Walton. Now it just comes down to, what do the Mets view as hindering development versus do they think that Baty can handle a true utility role and that can blossom him at the MLB level, or do they feel like he's best suited for everyday reps at AAA? That very well could be the case again, as he doesn't have nearly as much of a sample size like Vientos did at the AAA level. So we'll follow it along, but I think it's still Baty's job to lose until proven otherwise when looking at the utility role. But guys, that's going to conclude it for our latest Mets breakdown and our Big Mets Update segment. Let me know all your key takeaways in the comments down below, and be on the lookout for our next live show. Like I said, either tomorrow or Thursday, probably one of those days, we'll have a live show giving away a Mets jersey. Have a great one, folks, and as always, no matter what, let's go Mets, baby. Peace out.